Okay, today we're going to look at the updates that are happening to PTE Academic. And my job is to give you those updates as clearly as I possibly can so you walk away from this webinar feeling good about taking the exam if you're taking it on the 7th of August or thereafter, okay? So we're going to explore each of the different question types and bits and pieces of other stuff that is happening so you can prepare like a pro. My name is Jay. I was an English teacher for quite a few years, almost a decade. Then I spent a decade doing test prep for high stakes English tests that included PTE Academic and IELTS and OET and TOEFL. So I know a lot about these English language exams. I know a lot about how important they are for you and your journey to whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it be entering a university or migration or whatever. I've dealt with a lot of candidates. I studied applied linguistics, so I know a fair bit about language testing in particular. And my job right now is I'm an AI product manager at Pearson, where I focus on innovation in language testing. I don't work on PTE per se, but I do know a lot about it, and I do work with our colleagues from that part of the business. Okie dokie. So what are we going to do today? 4 things. I'm going to help you to understand what's changing on August the 7th, and probably more important, what's not changing on August the 7th, and when, which is August the 7th. We're going to look at summarize group discussion. That's the new speaking task that will be introduced very soon. We'll also look at the other speaking task that is being introduced. That's called respond to a situation. We're going to understand both of those in detail and do a little bit of practice of them as well, so you can walk away from this feeling confident if you're taking the test on August the 7th or thereafter. And number 4, I'm going to point you where to go. I'm going to give you direction of where to go and what to do next. Okay, so that's what we're going to set out to achieve. First of all, let's talk about what is not changing in PTE Academic. Because most of it, a majority of PTE Academics is going to stay exactly the same. Okay, so really it's quite small enhancements, we could call them, to this test. So what's not changing? Well, in the test, the original 20 questions that you are all probably very familiar with are not changing whatsoever. So questions like read aloud and repeat sentence, describe image, or write essay, summarize written text, reading multiple choice, multiple answers, etc. All of those 20 question types are staying exactly the same. No change whatsoever to how they look or how they sound or how long you have to prepare. Nothing at all, okay? So that's really good news. The test is also still 100% computer-based. You'll take this test at a test center. You will have the headset, the keyboard, there'll be people in the room as it's always been. There's going to be no human live speaking component, nothing like that. Nothing changes. And nothing also changes to your booking of the test as well. If you got your test booked, nothing changes. If you need to book your test, nothing changes with the booking process. And the test still has the same 4 sections of, what's the order again? Speaking, writing, reading, and listening, okay? Now, to do with scoring, the test is still actually 100% AI scored. That is, every single question type is scored by AI. There is a little bit of changes to do with double marking of some question types, which I'll tell you about towards the end of this webinar. But you can rest assured that this test is still an AI-powered or AI-scored test, primarily, okay? Score return time, so your report cards will be returned within 2 days, typically, unless there's some strange exception. And the test is still accepted by all the same governments and institutions, so nothing has changed there. Cool. You can breathe a sigh of relief that, as I said, the majority of this is not changing. In my opinion, Pearson PTE Academic is still the fastest, fairest, and simplest test that you can take for your whatever requirements you have, okay? So let's talk about what is changing. Let me just check that everything's cool with the webinar. Fine, I've got 1,000 participants, that's awesome. So what is changing? Okay, The two things that you as the test taker need to be most aware of are the two new question types. As I mentioned, summarize group discussion and respond to situation. They are both the new speaking question types. There are some other enhancements in AI and human scoring, the double marking, which I'll explain, some simplified skills scoring around integrated scoring and whatnot. I'll explain that. The number of questions slightly changes, and some of the names of the questions will also slightly change as well. But the key thing for you, I think, as the test taker, is that many of these changes, especially those enhancements, they happen behind the scenes. And for you as the test taker, they don't affect your test experience. For you as the test taker, your focus ought to be, I think, on these two new question types, first and foremost. That's what's critical for you. So where are we then? We're in a bit of a transition period as we speak because the announcement for the changes happened last week. Okay, so we're still in July. We're in this transition period where either you'll be taking the, let's call it the original PTE test with the 20 questions, or if you're taking the test on or after the 7th of August, you'll be taking the updated PTE test with 22 questions, okay? That's how this works. So if you're taking your test tomorrow, what's the date? It's July the 15th. If you're taking the test on the 16th of July, you'll be taking the original 20 question PTE. If you're taking on the 6th of August, you'll be taking the original PTE of 20 questions. If, however, you're taking the test on the 7th of August, again, or thereafter, you'll be taking the updated PTE with the 22 question types. Now, what happens if you take the test on, say, the 6th of July and you don't get the results that you want, so you need to take the test again? Well, then you'll need to book it and you'll need to take the updated test with the 22 question types. So even if you're taking the test sort of soon, I think this webinar is still going to be highly relevant for you, okay? Cool. So that's where we are in terms of the timeline. I hope that's clear. I hope you understand which test you're taking, okay? Should be clear. Let's now focus on the two new speaking task types, the two new question types. The first one's called summarize group discussion, okay? So I should say that this has been in the pipeline for quite a long time. Up on the Pearson PTE website, there was some information about the two new task types that were coming. So it might feel sudden that this is happening, but trust me, the research that's been happening on these two new question types has been happening for a long time at Pearson, and we've told people about these changes, including you, for quite a long time. So hopefully it won't be too much of a shock to you. But either way, I'm going to explain exactly what you need to do for these two new question types. Right, this interface is what you're going to see if you're taking the test on the 7th of August or thereafter for the summarized group discussion question type. Now, what you're seeing here won't change, okay? The image of the three people doesn't change. It's not like retail lecture, for example, where the image changes each time. It's static, it stays like this. Let's read the instructions. Let me just move myself. So you'll hear three people having a discussion. When you hear the beep, you summarize the whole discussion. You'll have 10 seconds to prepare and 2 minutes to give your response. Let me just play this for you so you get a feel for what you need to do, and then I'll explain it in depth, okay?
3 students are discussing time management at university.
There are a lot of challenges for us at university. It's not just doing well in the courses. We have to be able to balance the academic work with the personal life and also find time to join some extracurricular activities. I mean, I don't want my years at university to be only studying and writing papers.
I know. There's just so much to do.
I'll stop that because we're going to hear that audio a few times. So again, what happens here, and I'm going to explain this in much more depth coming up, but you're going to hear a conversation between 3 people in an academic context. So they're going to be talking about university life, things that happen at university or surrounded in, with accommodation or the sporting teams or whatever, something like that, okay? This conversation between the 3 people is going to go for 3 minutes. Now, critically, I don't have a notebook with me. Critically, while you're listening to this up to 3-minute conversation, you're going to be taking notes, Okay. Then you can have 10, when the conversation finishes, you'll have 10 seconds to prepare to speak. Kind of like retail lecture, where you'll look at your notes. Okay. Then the microphone will open and you'll have up to 2 minutes to provide a verbal summary of what the speakers said. Now, when I first saw this question type, I sort of thought, whoa, that's a lot. That seems really challenging and, overwhelming. But the more I looked at this and sort of, I guess in some sense I prepped for it, the more I realized it's like, oh, this is totally doable, actually. It seems overwhelming if you don't actually get in there and do it yourself. But as soon as you get in there and do it yourself, you'll get this feeling of relief like, I see what's happening here. I see what they're talking about. I've taken good notes and I can provide a summary. So let's go through this a little bit more. Let me just summarize again what you have to do in this task. You listen and take notes for up to 3 minutes, right? Then you have 10 seconds. After the conversation finishes, you have 10 seconds to prepare to speak. Like retail lecture, it's enough time to sort of take a deep breath, take a look at your notes. Your notes should be pretty well structured. Then the microphone opens and you speak for up to 2 minutes, summarizing that group discussion. That's it. There's sort of 3 key steps there. All right, let's keep digging into this one because I want you to understand it and feel confident. So keep in mind, first of all, on the left-hand side of the screen, this contributes points to both speaking and listening, as you might imagine. Why listening as well? Well, for the first 3 minutes, you're doing a lot of listening and you're noting down, lots of key points and main ideas and perspective, etc. So this relies on your listening skills. The speaking, in other words, relies on your listening skills. So this is an integrated task. It contributes points to both speaking and listening. Now, how you're graded, let's briefly talk about this. You're graded on 3 things, just like the other speaking tasks: content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. Now, the content will be scored by both an AI and a human. So it's going to be double marked, just like it currently is for describe, image, and retail lecture. Okay. So again, the content score will be double marked, not sometimes, always double marked by an AI and a human. Okay. Now, your pronunciation score and your oral fluency score, that is how you sound and how you deliver your speech, will always be marked by the AI, not the human. So it'll only be AI scored. So you can rest assured that, there won't be any bias in the assessment of how you sound or your accent or anything like that. That is still 100% scored by the AI. Number 5, bear in mind, if you decide to use a memorized template for this, which I think is kind of impossible anyway, because it relies on your listening. You have to talk on topic. You will get a 0. Please do not use memorized templates for your responses. Okay. On the right-hand side, let's take a look at this. So summarized group discussion will be the sixth speaking task. Okay. You get 2 or 3 on test day. So now, instead of 5 speaking tasks, not now, on August the 7th, there'll be 7 speaking tasks in total. Let me just check the webinar to make sure everything's cool. Everything's cool. Okay, cool. I hope you're following along. Let's stick to this summarized group discussion because, again, I want you to feel confident. I want you to walk away going, yes, I know what to do. So a few things to remember about this particular task. It's always 3 speakers. Never 2, never 1, never 4 or more, always 3 speakers, okay? Number 2, it's always a university context setting, okay? So the 3 speakers are going to be talking about things like time management or assignment extensions or library borrowing policies or the computer lab or accommodation or how to join a debating club or a professor that they like, whatever it is. Okay, they're not at the bakery, they're not at the police station, whatever. They're always in a university context. Number 3, naturally, you're going to be hearing students, professors, and or admin staff. So usually, I think you're going to hear 3 students, but you might hear 2 students and a professor or 2 students and, say, a librarian, or perhaps even 2 professors and a student or something like that. So it's going to be a combination of either also, I won't go there actually. I'm pretty sure it's mostly students, but sometimes you'll get a combination of professor and students, etc. Number 4, why add this task? Well, group discussions happen on campus a lot, and you should have the ability to understand what's happening and also the ability to summarize. Summarizing is a key academic language skill. So this task is not surreal, it's a very authentic type of academic listening/speaking task. Number 5, the gender is always going to be either 2 males and a female or 2 females and a male. Why? Because it sort of distinguishes the voices, okay? And also on the voices, it's going to be a variety of accents. In other words, speaker 1, 2, and 3 are going to be easy to distinguish, which is very helpful because when you're taking notes, which I'll show you in a second, you're going to be jotting down speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. Number 7, the order is not always speaker 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Majority of the time it will be like that, but sometimes it might go speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3, speaker 1, speaker 3, for example. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But again, I think another thing that might feel confusing or confronting or whatever, a little bit overwhelming with this is, identifying those speakers and then sort of remembering who the voices were. But trust me, when you prep for this and you hear the distinct male accented voice, speaker 1, or female accented voice, speaker 2, you know exactly who's who while you're listening. And then while you're summarizing, you're able to then do that well. Again, the whole thing with this item, this task type, I think is actually doing it. And then you go like, okay, I get it. Last thing, number of turns. So each speaker will take 2 or 3 turns. I think you know what I mean. Speaker 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, potentially 1, 2, 3 at the end. So there might be, say, 9 turns in total. That'd be maximum. Cool. Okay. Let's talk about note taking, because this is absolutely essential for this task. Personally, this is how I like to take notes. Before the discussion begins, I like to put topic. You might just put S1, speaker 1, S2, speaker 2, S3, speaker 3. Leave some space because you're going to be jotting down what they're saying in those spaces as they're saying it, okay? In other words, you're going to be taking notes as they're speaking. So your notes might look something like this. I'm going to play the audio for about 30 seconds. And these are my real notes, by the way. I did this under time pressure. I copied my handwritten notes and typed them up exactly as I had written them. You'll notice, for example, that there's spelling mistakes and shorthand and symbols. So these were my actual notes. And so I'm going to play the audio and just sort of follow along from top to bottom. Notice topic, speaker 1, there might be a couple of things, and then speaker 2 might be a couple of things. Remember that it goes back, so there might be some more things added, but just pay attention here.
3 students are discussing time management at university.
There are a lot of challenges for us at university. It's not just doing well in the courses. We have to be able to balance the academic work with the personal life and also find time to join some extracurricular activities. I mean, I don't want my years at university to be only studying and writing papers.
I know. There's just so much to do. I have to get to the lectures, do all the readings and assignments, complete several projects, and get ready for exams. I hardly have time to breathe.
You know, it's true. My biggest challenge since I started university is managing my time. I can't seem to get myself organised, and I always feel stressed and exhausted. And the worst thing is that I just seem to get organised and the term ends and I have to get used to a whole new schedule.
I agree. That is really difficult. Each course has its own schedule.
Cool. So hopefully you could sort of see the notes that I had taken and how I slotted them in under each speaker. This is my personal preference for how to take notes. There are other ways to do it. You could do it by topic, for example, and then insert the speaker under the topic. I personally find that challenging. I like this way, but as you practice, you'll get better at this and you might develop your own way to do it.
3.
Now, there's something else I want to add here about note taking. As we'll see in a second, you also scored on the being able to identify the interrelationships between the speakers. In other words, what they agree on and what they disagree about. Okay. Now, the best way to do this in note taking to not burden your memory is to, as you're taking notes and you notice that somebody had, let's do this one. Speaker 2 mentioned that he was tired, for example. And speaker 3 also mentioned exhaustion, and you might just quickly sort of draw a line between the two. And then when you're giving a verbal summary, you'll mention that they both complained about exhaustion and tiredness. You've created an interrelationship between the speakers. So it's kind of messy, but that's the nature of note-taking. Of course, you have this and you have your memory. And from this, you'll give your response, okay? Okay, let's talk about how you're scored. And what we're looking at here is the scoring for content. You're also scored, as I mentioned, for pronunciation and oral fluency, but let's not talk about that because I think you get that. That applies to all the other speaking tasks. For this one, it's idiosyncratic to this particular task or particular to this task. And also bear in mind that the content is, as I mentioned before, always double marked by both an AI and a human. Okay. Now they're both marking on the exact same thing. So let's look at this. This is a top score, by the way. The top score is 6. So how can you get a top score for content? Well, number 1, your response needs to be clear and accurate and demonstrate full comprehension of the discussion. That doesn't mean that you're memorizing exactly what every speaker said in the exact same words verbatim. No. You're paraphrasing main ideas in your own words and getting the details, and you're doing that with specificity. You're being specific. You see, what sort of differentiates a high score of, say, 6 with a low score is the degree of how specific or nuanced you are with what you understand as you're taking notes, and then what you're able to then summarize back. You see, a high speaker will be able to get a lot more of the nuance and details and the ideas, where a low proficiency speaker will get sort of more basic or superficial ideas. Okay? Number 2, this is something I said before about interrelationships. So the response, your speaking response, explores the relationships between different points of view and synthesizes different perspectives. Let me simplify that. What I mean by that is, let's say you're listening to a discussion about study techniques, and speaker 1 likes to cram before an exam. He thinks it's the best way because all the ideas are fresh in his memory. But speaker 2 doesn't like cramming. She likes to study using flashcards for several weeks before the exam. Well, they're different perspectives, right? They're different ideas on that. So you should mention that. You should mention speaker 1 likes to do it this way. Speaker 2, however, takes a different approach and she does it this way. Or a different perspective might be how they perceived a lecture. Let's say they're talking about a lecture and speaker 1 thought it was very interesting and in-depth. Speaker 2 thought the lecture may have been superficial, whatever. There's going to be agreements and disagreements, different points of view, okay? I'll give you a third one. Let's say they're talking about traveling to university, right? The commute to university. They all have long commutes. Well, speaker 1 likes the long commute because it allows him to relax and meditate, and speaker 2 doesn't like it because it's a waste of time, whatever. Anyway, you're going to hear these different points of view, these different perspectives, and you need to explore them in your response. Number 3 is much more sort of language related, about expressions and vocabulary, appropriateness, and the ease and precision of your language. Number 4 is about sort of structure, coherence, how you organize your response. Now, this one relates to how you structure your notes. So for 6.4 here, you'll get a high score if you're able to read from your notes and structure them as you're speaking. So you sort of have to do that on the fly a little bit using, say, connective devices like discourse markers, however, or in addition, or also, words like this. In other words, it needs to flow. The more that your response flows, the higher your content score will be. Cool. So that was a lot of information. I appreciate you sticking with me for that one. Let me just check everything's cool with the webinar. Nice. Okay. We've nearly wrapped up summarized group discussion. So the best approach, listen for the topic. That's going to be crystal clear because it's said in the instructions and the first speaker is going to reiterate it, okay? But you need to get the topic because you should understand what they're talking about. There are going to be various speakers. As I said, you're going to know the speakers because of their gender and their accents. It's going to be clear who's who. Listen for their perspectives, their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings on the topic, their agreements and their disagreements. So that's what you're listening for. Really, you're taking notes on that. So you're taking notes on number 2 here, each speaker's main ideas and any supporting details, similarities and differences in perspectives. And when you go to speak, remember you have up to 2 minutes, so it's quite a long time you get to speak. You do get to show off your skills here. You summarize the main ideas and the supporting details. You mention perspectives. You mention those interrelationships. You structure it as well as you can, including making it coherent. You focus on your clarity and your fluency, and please do not use any template responses because you will get 0 and that will be a complete waste. Cool. So just to quickly wrap up summarized group discussion, this is what it looks like. You need to take notes during that 3 minutes. Your notes are key. You turn your notes into a verbal summary with the main ideas and the supporting details. Let's just take a deep breath. I'm going to take a deep breath. Just bear with me. I'll have a drink. All right. Second speaking task. This one is actually a lot simpler. It's called respond to situation. This is what it looks like on test day from August the 7th onwards. Okay? Now, let's read the instructions at the top. It says, listen to and read a description of a situation. So below the bold text, you'll see the description of a situation. And we'll listen to it in just a second. You'll have 10 seconds to think about your answer. Then you'll hear a beep and you'll have 40 seconds to answer the question. Answer as completely as you can. So let's listen to and read that non-bold text there. Ready?
You're working on an essay for your course and you're having difficulty organising your ideas. You approach your professor after class and ask her if you could come to her office to discuss your essay. What do you say to her?
Hopefully, naturally, you had felt some sort of impulse to actually speak here because you know what to do. This is not difficult in any real sense of using English in a day-to-day way, which I'm sure you know how to do, okay? So hopefully you felt compelled to actually, excuse me, Professor, you know exactly what to do here. But nevertheless, let's dig into this. So respond to a situation. First, you listen to and read the situation. So it's there on the screen and you hear it. So it's super clear what you need to do. You prepare to speak. You get 10 seconds before the microphone opens. Then you have up to 40 seconds to answer the question. And it's framed, by the way, in a question. What do you say to her? Okay. Left-hand side of the screen. Keep in mind, this question type, this new question type, only contributes points to speaking. The content score is double marked by AI and humans. Every single one, not some, every single one is double marked. The pronunciation oral fluency is only scored by AI. No human scoring in pronunciation oral fluency. And number 5, you will get a 0 if you memorize and regurgitate something that you've heard on the internet or YouTube or wherever. Okay, so please, no memorized responses there. Let's have a look on the right-hand side here. So this will be the 7th speaking task, the final speaking task. Respond to a situation. You get 2 or 3 on test day. And again, there are now, not now, I keep saying that, on August the 7th, there will be 7 question types. Prior to August the 7th, 5 original question types. And just to reiterate, nothing changes with the other question types. They stay exactly the same, no changes whatsoever. Cool. A few things to remember about this particular question type. 1, the situation that they give you is critical. The situation includes or consists of the background. So it sort of tells you the background of what's going on. It tells you the person that you're going to talk to, and it tells you the goal, what you need to do. It creates a context for your response. Now, when I said you might feel compelled to answer that question just naturally, that's because language works in context, okay? We only ever use language in different contexts. There's no way we can use language outside of context. And so when we're in a context, we sort of want to speak in a certain way, whether it's hanging out with a friend or ordering a coffee at a cafe or giving a lecture at a university, whatever. There are these different contexts and there's different ways of speaking. Now, what this context or situation does, it will compel you to want to apologize or complain or advise or suggest or ask, request, etc. Okay? If you're curious and you want to look this up, these are called pragmatics. These are pragmatic skills, okay? And in English, there are certain ways to do them, okay? There are sort of formulaic ways to do them, but not too formulaic. I'll get to that in a second. Number 3, keep in mind this task that I just showed you, you must speak in the first person. This is, excuse me, Professor, I would like to apologize, or can I ask you a question? It's I. It's I. You have to put yourself in that situation. It's you speaking in the first person to that imaginary person, okay? In other words, it's not she, he, or it, okay? It's I. And who you're talking to, number 4, most of the time you'll be speaking to one person, a professor, a classmate, a librarian. Again, it's university context. But every now and again, you may be sort of speaking to a small group, say your study group or something like that. Hope that's clear. Let's keep digging. Let's talk about content here and how you can get a top score for content, 6 out of 6, because I think this is totally doable. Now, bear in mind, again, content is scored by both an AI and a human. Now, how you get a top score is that you deal with the situation effectively, okay? So this really says something about memorized or template responses, which will be given a 0. You must deal with the situation that you are given, okay? The background, who you're speaking to, and the goal, okay? Number 2, you need to accomplish that goal with consideration of the context. So if you need to request something or suggest something to a friend or complain about your roommate's cooking smell, I don't know, something like that, that's what it's about. And the way that you apologize, request, complain is key, okay? There are sort of, think about it. There are different, take an apology. There are sort of simple ways to apologize. Professor, I'm sorry. Okay, it probably wouldn't get you a great score because you haven't incorporated the situation. You haven't given full consideration to the context. You need to add in these things to develop your answer out and make it sound sort of appropriate. We'll talk about appropriateness in a second. So, number 3, you need to communicate with ease, flexibility, and precision. So again, there's the sort of I'm sorry verse. Professor, do you mind if I have a word with you? I'd like to apologize about something, much more sort of fluent, precise way of apologizing. Number 4 needs to be appropriate. It needs to be appropriate to the situation, to the person you're speaking to, etc. This all sounds like, whoa, this sounds like a lot and, overwhelming, etc. But if you have proficiency in English and you've perhaps spent a lot of time speaking English, this stuff should come quite naturally to you, okay? This is the thing with language tests. We need to create this criteria, but for you, the test taker, what you need to focus on is just what's happening on that interface on test day and giving an appropriate response. It's probably the best way to think about it. Okay, so best approach. Incorporate the situation. Don't speak off topic. You need to include the background and the person you're talking to. Actually, sorry, I need to go back here because there's a key thing that I forgot. In number 4, it says expand beyond the prompt language. In other words, it is not only fine, but you should add additional pieces of information to expand out your response so it's really well developed. In other words, you can use your imagination in giving your response. Okay, so for example, if you need to complain to your friend about, complain to your housemate about the music being too loud at nighttime, well, you might include from your imagination the reason that you're complaining, which might be that you have an important exam tomorrow or whatever. You can add these little pieces in to expand your response close to 40 seconds and make it fully developed. And also, the last little phrase, that needs to be persuasive. Okay, so if you're going to complain, complain. If you're going to apologize, apologize. If you're going to suggest, etc. Okay, best approach. Incorporate the situation. Again, you read and you listen, you get it. You also have 10 seconds to sort of figure it out. Achieve the goal. Be persuasive. Apologize, complain, request. Do it clearly. Speak appropriately. Think about formality between, apologizing to a friend versus apologizing to a professor. Think about that relationship in that setting. And of course, you're going to be graded on vocab and grammar, and appropriateness and persuasiveness are also key. All right, I've spoken a lot. Let me just check everything's cool. Everything's cool. Okay, let's do one. I'm going to record you. I'm going to record 40 seconds on my phone. Just bear with me. Let's do it. You can do this. This is the first time you're seeing this, so if you don't do it very well, that's okay. You can practice. I'm going to play the audio. You're going to listen. You're going to read. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to sort of think about what you're going to say. Then I'm going to give you 40 seconds to actually say it. Ready? Listen and read.
You're working on an essay for your course and you're having difficulty organizing your ideas. You approach your professor after class and ask her if you could come to her office to discuss your essay. What do you say to her?
10 seconds to prepare. I'll count down from 7. 7, 8, 9, speak. It's 20 seconds. 30 seconds. And that's 40 seconds. Now, okay, that would have been a bit hard for you for a few reasons. One, it's the first time you've ever done this in a sort of test environment. You've probably done it countless times in the real world. 2, you had no timer on the screen, so maybe you finished early because you just weren't aware of the 40 seconds. Like the other PTE speaking tasks, you don't need to speak for exactly 40 seconds. You can speak for, whatever, 30, 35 seconds, whatever your response requires. But anyway, first time you've done this, when you practice, think about practicing with different types of goals, different, apologies, suggestions, requests, etc. That will help you. Anyway, there's lots of practice materials. I'll talk about that at the end.
You're working on...
Cool. So we've just covered there you are there. We've just covered the 2 new speaking types that are coming into the test from August the 7th onwards. Okay. So, it's the first time you've seen them. It's the first time you sort of practice with them. It might still feel a bit overwhelming, but as I say, when you practice by yourself, it'll feel much better. You'll be feeling much more reassured. Okay, let's talk about the additional enhancements. What's happening behind the scenes to the scoring enhancements. This, as I said before, this really shouldn't affect you as the test taker. It won't affect your test day experience. Okay, for you, your focus should be on those 2 new question types and getting top scores for content, pronunciation, oral fluency. Nevertheless, let me explain what's going on here. And everything I'm about to explain, by the way, is in this PTE Academic score guide. I'll give you the QR code at the end. So there's an updated scoring process. In November last year, Pearson introduced double marking for describe image and retell lecture. That is, for every response given for describe image and retell lecture, it would be double marked for content by both an AI and a human. Not some, all of them, okay? So that's been running for like 8 months, and it didn't increase the difficulty of the test. In fact, people I think they sort of forgot about it, that it was happening. I will just reiterate, it was only for content, not pronunciation, oral fluency. It's only done by the AI. So from August the 7th, this will now be applied to 5 additional tasks. So let me get this right. So it's describe image, retell lecture, as it's been happening for the last 8 months. This double marking for content will also be applied to the 2 new speaking tasks, summarize group discussion and respond to situation. It will also be applied to the 2 writing tasks, write essay and summarize written text. That is double marking for content by both an AI and a human. And it will apply to the listening task, summarize spoken text, which is a writing one, so that it'll also be double marked. So in other words, 7 question types will be double marked just for content by a human and an AI. The other 2 dot points in write essay, a couple more will be marked by the human as well. All in all, this is still an AI scored test. All question types are scored by AI first and foremost. The humans double check those 7 particular question types for content only. That accounts for about 13% of the entire test being double marked. So vast majority of the test is AI scored. In fact, all of it's AI scored. I think you get the point. Anyway, number 2, simplified skills scoring. So from August the 7th, the integrated tasks that score for multiple skills, some of them will be simplified, okay? So for example, read aloud, to take one example, currently is scored for speaking and reading, but from August the 7th will only account for your speaking score, not reading score, okay? So there's a bit of simplification happening across those. Does this really affect you as a test taker? Not really. Not really, I don't think. Number 3, the number of questions. I guess this one kind of does. 11 question types are changing in number. The length of PTE will slightly increase, not much. I think it's by about 15 minutes max, but for most people, it won't actually change the length at all, because for most people, they don't do the timers all the way to the end anyway. So anyway, there is a slight extension to the length of the test because of the number of questions. Number 4, from August the 7th, 3 tasks, the names of them will change. So remember there was reading and writing, fill in the blanks, for example. That'll now be called reading drop down. So there's a sort of simplification of the naming process, especially for those fill in the blanks tasks in particular. All of this you can read about in the score guide, by the way. And the 5th one, this probably, you might want to check this in the score guide, it's up to you. There are more criteria for greater accuracy. So in the essay, for example, the content score will be from not from 0 to 3, but 0 to 6. So there's sort of greater differentiation, granularity, if you will, for some of the criteria. I don't know if that affects you. You may be aware of the criteria. This will certainly be something teachers will be interested in for when they're actually teaching this. Cool. So this is the third last slide. We're nearly there. Let me just reiterate what's going on with the scoring process. All 22 question types from August the 7th will be machine scored or AI scored, okay? The seven that I mentioned, I won't mention them again because I'll probably pass out, will be double marked for content only by humans and AI, not sometimes, all of them. And again, this has been happening for 2 speaking tasks for the last 8 months since November last year. Bear in mind the humans will never score you for fluency and pronunciation. Okay, so your accent, the way you look, where you're from, none of this is visible to the human scorers, by the way. They're only listening to your speech. That's all. They don't get any identification whatsoever. Sorry, let me take that back. They don't score you on your pronunciation and fluency. The machine scores you on your pronunciation and fluency. When the humans are marking you for content, they don't see you, they don't know who you are, they don't know your name, nothing like that. In fact, it's marked by your single test is marked by multiple human scorers. Anyway, so that's happening. It shouldn't be a biggie. Yeah. Okay. Last slide. So preparation steps. What do you need to do now if you're taking the test on August the 7th or thereafter? Well, you need to understand more deeply about what's happening. That's why I've got that QR code there in the bottom left that will link you to a web page that describes all of the enhancements, all of the updates to PTE, so you can be fully up to date on that. You should also take a glance at that score guide. It can be a bit complicated in some parts, but check it out. You can find that on the webpage there. If you want to start preparing for that August the 7th and go a bit deeper, there's lots of prep materials for you. There's a test tip document. There are specific documents on respond to a situation and summarize group discussion. There's a video course there. There's a guided practice test. There's lots of stuff. There's also a QR code there down in the middle of the screen, which is to a YouTube video that I did, which is a sort of FAQs. Okay, so you can watch that. There's also a link there to the 2 task types where you can watch videos on the 2 new task types. Then finally, on the right-hand side, there are resources that can help you to prepare for the updated test from August the 7th onwards, including 3 new scored practice tests that include the 2 new task types. Cool bananas. That's it. That was a lot of information. I hope that's clear. I hope it's not overwhelming. I think the key thing for you as the test taker is to focus on those, if you're taking the test on August the 7th onwards, focus on those 2 new task types. Again, it might feel a bit overwhelming at the beginning when you haven't practiced it and sat down and applied yourself and done it yourself. Once you've actually sat there, listen, taken notes, for example, for summarized group discussion, actually try to give a up to 2-minute response, you'll breathe easier. It's like, oh, okay, cool, I can do this. I can identify those voices. I know what's going on. And for respond to situation, it feels like a natural speaking task. As I said, as soon as that sort of microphone opens, you'll feel compelled. You know how to apologize or request something or complain about something. It's a little bit tricky because you have to sort of incorporate that situation, etc. So it requires a bit of practice. But, that one's all about appropriateness. And I think you have those language skills. Cool. All right. That's all for me. If you need more help, please check out the pearsonpte.com website. Yeah, it's all there, and it's all there in the score guide. Thanks very much for listening.